Get more backup. And lock down the airspace.
Yuri, you okay?
If he makes it out of that building, we're gonna lose him.
I'm gonna go,
Do your thing.
Yes!
It's a special thing when we finally receive a video game that does a superhero justice. Marvel's Spider-Man manages to redefine well-known combat systems, open-world traversal, and what makes an amazing Spider-Man story. It not only goes far beyond what's been expected of Spider-Man games as of late, it leaves almost every superhero game in the dust, and stays on par with the Arkham series, of course. While feeling like it takes influences from that franchise, creating a more serious and human tone, and including their own variation of free-flow combat, Insomniac created a game that feels like it wholeheartedly belongs to Spider-Man. With Peter Parker and his double life being so prominent in media as of late, it is genius to release a game, and a game of this quality, to the public.
Writing your memoirs? Don't forget the hyphen between Spider and Man.
Get the chopper ready. I won't be long.
This iteration of Peter Parker and his laundry list of friends and foes don't stray too far from the norm. However, each character is shaken up enough to make each encounter with a familiar face feel fresh and fascinating. Most characters have aspects of themselves that deviate in progressive ways, giving them viewpoints and relationships that are unique from their multiverse counterparts. While Peter still goes through the typical double life storyline, balancing paying rent, fighting crime, and retaining stable relationships, his interactions with his supporting cast continually provide for a story that wants to feel grounded. Although we do fight a 700-pound man in a rhino costume and a criminal with a robotic tail, we still get to peek into Peter Parker's life, viewing his trials as an adult in the making. It was just as fascinating fighting Electro as it was watching Peter and MJ try to rekindle their relationship. The 23-year-olds struggle to understand where things stand between them. The balance between their situation and the introduction to Miles Morales is handled wonderfully, giving each character their own time to shine. With every one of Peter's supporting cast feeling like they are making an impact in his life, the story tightly navigates between action-packed and heartfelt, hitting each note when needed and creating a story that feels deeply personal and emotionally gripping.
Thank you, mate, for everything. Here's to many more years of service.
Spider-Man may be 8 years into his career, but after finally defeating Wilson Fisk in one of the best openings in a video game that you can ask for, Peter is pushed to his limits, taking on one of his most interesting villains yet. Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative, may not be the deadliest enemy Spider-Man has taken on, but he sustains the idea of a sympathetic antagonist. His relationship with Aunt May, as well as the passion to help the city, creates a hero-villain dynamic that has never truly been explored before in a video game. It's just a shame that some of the members of the Sinister Six don't play as big as a role as the others, but the inclusion of these redefined villains helps create a new world for fans to delve into. While they may not be prominent in the overall narrative, there's still enough backstory to allow them to be well developed. And that's what's so important about this Spider-Man universe. It belongs to Insomniac. While there are nods to different Spider-Man medias, there are so many unique variations from what we've come to expect from a universe of this caliber. Mary Jane is a reporter, throwing herself into the front lines of journalism and becomes a more reliable and intellectual character overall. We see the balance Peter must sustain watching over Miles, and learning from his own personal mentor. We won't delve deep into the story to refrain from spoilers, because this is a story that players should experience for themselves. With such a tightly crafted storyline, there is so much to dissect and to be surprised by. The most important character the game provides is New York City itself. While not necessarily a character, it still feels alive at times, a true bustling city to swing around in. From flying high at the top of skyscrapers to moving around and interacting with civilians on the ground, there was never a moment where I didn't want to traverse the concrete jungle. Most of the time, I felt like swinging through the city streets and tackling the many side objectives just to collect as many of their tokens as possible. Traversal in Marvel Spider-Man is top-notch. The feeling of speed and momentum are captured perfectly with each pendulum swing past buildings. With not only the ability to web sling through the city, but wall run and zip around corners and tops of buildings, there is practically nothing that will halt Spider-Man's forward movement. It isn't unheard of to look at the clock and realize you've been swinging around the city for a few hours without actually progressing in the main story. It's that fun. We've tried different varieties of web swinging over the last few years, and everybody wants to harken back to the brilliance that was Spider-Man 2. But it should be well known at this point that there's a new web slinger in town. Marvel's Spider-Man goes far and beyond its predecessor, giving us a swinging system that is going to be extremely difficult to dethrone. The most important and subtle part of the traversal that makes this system so unique is the ability to ricochet off points in the world. R2 and L2 will pull Spider-Man over to the nearest highlighted point, and with a perfectly timed jump, he will launch himself into the air and over any obstacle that stands in his way. That's not to say anything would get in his way in the first place, thanks in part to the outstanding parkour system incorporated into his movement. R2 handles most of the forward progression, and Peter will automatically leap across and over any obstacle in his path. Insomniac made a strong effort to ensure that if players commit to their traversal system, then they will be able to maneuver around the city with ease, swinging, leaping, and jumping without effort, while still being rewarded with spectacular gameplay.
Look for an opening. Boom.
Like that?
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Only this time, just let me have it. Right on the jaw. Okay? I can.
Oh, sorry.
No. It's all good. You keep that up and you'll be fine. All right. Lesson's over.
It would be one thing to have Spider-Man's movement be exhilarating, but to manage to nail combat as well really shows that Insomniac understands how Spider-Man should play and feel. Combat is fluid but challenging, giving players mechanics and movesets that really capture how our titular hero would fight. While being similar to the Arkham combat, there is enough altered to create a fighting style that captures the essence of the system, but keeps it wholly unique. I struggled at first without the ability to counterattack, but after a few back alley brawls and finding myself getting completely destroyed, the idea of dodging away from attacks started to become more natural. It may take a few upgrades to get there, but eventually combat opens up, showing its true depth with every sequential leveling. Spider-Man's movement is natural and intuitive, at times allowing you to do movement that you wouldn't expect in combat like this. Sliding under an enemy or zipping over to them with a web strike can be an effective way to keep mobile, which is the way fighting is supposed to be handled, showing players how agile and strong Spider-Man can be. We have so much more options when it comes to tackling enemies, just with base attacks. Web zipping closes the distance, allowing us to strike enemies from afar and close in for more devastating attacks. If we aren't personally able to bring ourselves to our opponent for whatever reason, then it isn't too difficult to pull them over to us, or just straight throw an object at them from a distance. Spider-Man will throw just about anything he can get his webbing on, whether it's a manhole cover, a stand for newspapers, or a car door, or even a motorcycle. If players are having a lot of trouble with taking on enemies, then they do have the option to juggle their opponents in the air. With enough upgrades, we can stay high up and pull enemies to our level, essentially reducing the possibility of getting hit by melee attacks to zero. Gameplay gets increasingly more interesting with the inclusion of gadgets. Thanks in part to Peter Parker's genius-level intelligence and access to components from his work, there is a variety of fun and reliable web shooter attachments to play around with. From the get-go, we do have access to Spider-Man's normal web shooters, giving us a handful of shots to web up enemies. Later on in the game, we slowly start to build an arsenal of gadget types that really ramp up gameplay. Web bombs, taser shots, and trip mines are welcome additions to Peter's abilities, and provides enough variety in combat to keep things from getting too stale. Mix in the many different kinds of enemies and Spider-Man's spectacular animation, and you have a recipe for combat segments that are fast, fluid, and will keep you on your toes.
Those masks. Who are these guys?
There's no one here but us. We will find the file, or you will die.
This is bad. They'll kill her if I alert them.
In true modern gaming fashion, players usually have the opportunity to go to stealth before having to go toe-to-toe with hired goons. While pretty base level and straightforward, stealth can be a fun and effective way to take out enemies. It doesn't do a whole lot to progress gameplay further, but it was enjoyable to watch Spider-Man grab an enemy from afar or fling their head into a metal beam before webbing them against a wall. Stealth is passable as Spider-Man, however at times player control is placed on side characters like Mary Jane, boiling gameplay down even further. Her gameplay sections can be entertaining from a narrative perspective, but the limitations placed on her, since she isn't a superhuman spider hybrid, don't tend to be the game's highlights. It's clear that stealth is reminiscent of gameplay we've seen in just about every Spider-Man game that came before. Starting with the noir segments and shattered dimensions, it's been a struggle to properly incorporate stealth into a Spider-Man game. But it's safe to say, even though it's not the end-all be-all, this game handles it pretty well, and it doesn't allow it to feel forced or unnecessary. It's an expected inclusion at this point, but at least we can be thankful they managed to find a comfortable balance for it. As the story progresses, Spider-Man will slowly have access to unlockable spider suits. The styles and inspirations span across multiple Spider-Man medias, giving us your straightforward suits like Spider-Man Noir and 2099, but also let us play as the Scarlet Spider and a few others that I won't spoil. Each suit provides its own special attachment to go along with it, giving our hero different abilities like area of effect attacks, enhanced combat, or faster movement. The best part is the fact that players are allowed to mix and match different suits and abilities. So players wearing the Noir suit can still use the Iron Spider robot arms or use 2099's ability to reduce gravity. Although the advanced suit is stylish and unique in its own right, having the ability to change your suit and change it on the fly is a fascinating addition that adds nothing but flavor to the overall package. On top of that, having suit unlockables only be purchasable by side missions, which give you the tokens required to buy the costumes, there is ample reason to continually swing around the city looking for the next side activity. Rewarding side objectives with extra cosmetics and useful abilities is a smart tactic that gives players plenty of incentive to continually experience everything Spider-Man has to offer.
I tried, but he's not very talkative. Plus, I think he hates me.
You have that effect on a lot of people.
But you love me, right, Yuri?
I tolerate you.
Wow, that might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me.
Marvel's Spider-Man is a breath of fresh air for a franchise that no longer felt like it had a place in gaming. It changes up Peter's life just enough to keep things interesting, and understands that it has to shake up gameplay and keep relationships strong in order to make an impact in the superhero gaming genre. Combat is fast and action-packed. Web swinging is the best it's ever been, and the trials Spider-Man goes through are relatable to just about anyone. After about 25 hours of being a friendly neighborhood superhero, I still didn't feel like I wanted to put the game down, and with extra hours of side activities, I don't think I'm going to anytime soon. With all the already crazy amount of outstanding PlayStation exclusives, Peter and the Sinister Six deserve a spot in our gaming library. I truly hope we can get a sequel or a spin-off in some capacity. There have been rumors and partial confirmations floating around the internet, so I will hold hope that this amazing franchise can swing its way into success.